storm, earth, and fire, heed my call.
Hello there! Welcome to the 5.4 Elemental Shaman Guide. My name is Tusky, and in this video we'll discuss the Elemental Shaman in all of its glory, covering everything. If you're new to the Elemental Shaman, this guide will cover the basics from gearing and talents and glyphs to your rotation, cooldown usage, and your role as a hybrid. We'll also discuss some useful add-ons. Additionally, we'll have an advanced chat about the Elemental Shaman, designed more for players who have a grasp of their Shaman and who want to squeeze more throughput and usefulness from it. Even if you're a skilled Ele Shaman, you may get something from this section of the guide. The Elemental Shaman is, as the name suggests, a master of the elements. You'll be using lightning and fire-based abilities at long range to do damage. However, unlike most ranged classes, you also have the ability to provide healing to your raid members without sacrificing your damage. You're also extremely mobile, with one of your signature spells castable while moving by default, and with the press of a cooldown, you become able to cast any spell while moving for a short duration. This is one of the staples of the Shaman, and it should not be underestimated. You bring passive spell power, mastery, and haste to your entire raid without ever having to worry about the uptime of buffs. And you have some extremely strong cleave and multi-target damage. You also have totems, which can provide temporary but extremely helpful effects for your raid, be it redirecting nasty spells, stunning or rooting groups of enemies, breaking fear effects, providing raid healing, and even summoning elementals. You're also very difficult to kill, with a suite of abilities allowing you to take damage and either reduce it or heal it back up very fast. And when all goes to hell and your healers can't help you, the Elemental Shaman can, at least for a few moments, stand their ground and heal themselves or another in desperate need of aid. Your rotation is simple but effective, and goes from single target to multi-target cleanly and seamlessly. If you've ever seen an Elemental Shaman AoEing, and believe me, you'll see it, you'll know why people call them the Emperor Palpatine of WoW. One of the most iconic things about the Elemental Shaman is their ability to duplicate their own spells, with higher gear levels allowing for constant duplication of just about every spell you cast. An Elemental Shaman can become a complete turret of magma, lightning, and death. You also bring Bloodlust, the most powerful raid damage cooldown in the game, hands down. Raid leaders will praise you for good, smart use of Bloodlust, and you become instrumental for your group's success. Most importantly, the Elemental Shaman is fun to play, with a simple rotation that is easy to learn while simultaneously having aspects of it that allow for a deeper analysis and advanced use of abilities. So what abilities does the Elemental Shaman have in particular? Let's go over a few of them. You have Lightning Bolt, which is a short cast damage spell that can be used while moving. You have Chain Lightning, which deals damage to multiple targets. You have Lava Burst, a short cast damage spell that hits very hard, always critically hits, and increases in damage by 50% if it hits a target that has Flame Shock on them. You have Flame Shock, which is a damage over time spell on a target that increases the damage of your Lava Burst, and has a passive chance every time it deals damage to reset the cooldown of your Lava Burst and make the next cast instant. You have Ascendance, which turns you into a big fire elemental for 15 seconds and removes the cooldown on your Lava Burst and transforms your Chain Lightning into a much harder hitting Lava Beam. You have Bloodlust, a hugely powerful raid cooldown that increases the haste of all raid members by 30% for 45 seconds. You have Stormlash Totem, which makes all raid members' attacks deal bonus lightning damage for 10 seconds. You have Flame Tongue Weapon, which passively increases your spell damage by 7%. You have Lightning Shield, which is a buff you place on yourself for an hour that deals damage to anyone that hits you. Sounds irrelevant, right? Wrong. You have Fulmination, which causes your lightning bolts and chain lightnings to grant stacks of Lightning Shield, grants you mana so you never have to worry about that, and causes your Earth Shock, a basic instant cast damage ability, to consume extra stacks of Lightning Shield to dramatically increase in damage. Handling Fulmination is important for the Elemental Shaman. You have Searing Totem, which is your staple totem that deals damage to enemies. Finally, you have Thunderstorm, an instant cast spell that restores a little bit of mana, but most importantly deals damage around you and knocks enemies away from you. This can be great, or it can be terrible, depending on how you use it. These aren't all of the Elemental Shaman's abilities, but these are some of the ones that you'll be using a lot. Let's talk basic gearing now. First and foremost, the Elemental Shaman is a mail wearer, and you gain a 5% intellect bonus while wearing a full set of mail. There is no questioning this. You wear mail, not leather, not cloth, and definitely not plate. You find mail and you wear it, regardless of the circumstances. A slightly better piece of gear does not make up for the loss of 5% of your most important stat. It goes without saying that intellect is your primary stat, as it increases spell damage and your spell critical hit chance, so you want pieces of mail with intellect on them. Agility and strength are pointless for you. Secondly, you have to think about your hit rating. This is the most important secondary stat for Shaman, and you have to consider it. Your spells can miss, and if a spell misses, it is a wasted spell, and that is terrible. The complicated math behind hit rating is that you need a 15% chance to hit with your spells in order to never miss during a raid. Go to your character panel and mouse over your hit chance under the spell tab, not the melee tab. The tooltip here shows your chance to miss with your spells on targets of various levels. They should all be at 0. You should never, ever miss with a spell. However, once you get past 15% hit chance, all further hit rating is pointless. You won't be fighting anything else high level until the expansion releases. For this reason, you want your hit chance to be as close to 15% as is possible. Ideally, it would be exactly 15%, but this is next to impossible to achieve. Get as close as you can with reforging and gemming, but never go under it. At lower gear levels, so I mean anything under item level 530 or so, you just need to have your hit at 15% or higher. Don't worry too much about hitting the 15% mark bang on the head, ever. Remember that if you have spirit on your gear, which is very likely with mail pieces, that the spirit will be converted into hit rating for you. So don't panic if you're at 20% hit chance and you don't have hit rating on your gear. It's all coming from spirit. Next, secondary stats. Although they're secondary, they are very important. You have to worry about mastery, haste, and crit chance. Your mastery is a stat that dictates a certain benefit for your spec. It's different for each class and spec, and for the Elemental Shaman, your mastery is Elemental Overload, which grants a chance for your damage spells to duplicate themselves. This is amazing. Haste increases your spellcasting speed. The more haste you have, the faster you'll cast spells. However, this also affects the spells that deal damage over time, like your Flame Shock. If you have higher haste, Flame Shock will deal its damage more often. There are, however, haste breakpoints. These are levels of haste where you gain the extra tick of damage from Flame Shock, and afterwards the haste isn't so useful. Generally, you won't have to worry about these. Haste is a great stat for us in general. Finally, we have crit chance. This stat increases your chance to crit with your spells. However, it is not that great for Elemental Shaman. Granted, it's not a massive waste, but remember that Lava Burst, which is our main source of damage on a single target, always crits. You could have 0% chance to crit on your character sheet and Lava Burst would still crit every time. So, compared to other classes, we don't get that much out of crit. However, it's not the end of the world if you have a piece of gear that has crit on it. Your other spells do benefit from crit, so it's not an entirely wasted stat, it's just not your most efficient one, and we like the efficiency. Those are our stats, so which one do you want the most? The basic priority of our stats is as such. First, 15% hit chance is your number one priority. Secondly, mastery. Thirdly, haste. And lastly, crit. In that order. Mastery is, by and large, the strongest secondary stat for a gearing Elemental Shaman. We'll talk more about mastery and haste in the advanced section, but needless to say they're very close in terms of benefit, and you want them both. But try to prioritize mastery until you're in very high gear levels. I mean like 560, 570 high. Now, gems. First of all, you need to gem your gear. There is no excuse for not gemming your gear. I can understand if you're using gear that you're going to replace really fast, but you can still gem your gear as you get more of it once you hit about the Throne of Thunder. There is no reason for you to enter the Siege of Orgrimmar without gems or enchants. You need them. They are important, and these are the ones you want. So there are 5 types of gem slots. Meta, which is only in the head slot, red, yellow, blue, and prismatic. All pieces of gear with gem slots have bonuses for using the correct colour gem in the socket. Generally speaking, socket bonuses are good, but they are not always good for us. Look at what they are. Intellect is good. Spirit, not so much. So, let's talk about the different slots. Meta sockets depend on how far into the legendary questline you are. If you haven't gotten the legendary Meta gem, use a burning primal diamond and finish your legendary questline. If you have the legendary Meta gem, use it because it's awesome. Red sockets should be gemmed with a brilliant primordial ruby, which provides intellect, which provides spell damage and spell crit, which is good for us. The same can be said of prismatic sockets. You'll get one of these on your belt during the enchant section, so slot another brilliant primordial ruby in there. Yellow sockets should be gemmed with an artful vermilion onyx, which provides intellect and mastery. Blue sockets depend on whether or not you are at your hit cap. If you aren't, use a purified imperial amethyst, which provides intellect and hit. If you need lots of hit, use a sparkling river's heart for a chunk of spirit, which is converted into hit for us. If you're at the hit cap, use the good old brilliant primordial ruby. Chances are you won't need the socket bonuses that include blue slots. Now, enchants. You need them, use them, they're important, no excuse, etc, etc. The headpiece and the necklace cannot be enchanted. For your shoulder piece, use a greater crane wing inscription for intellect and critical strike rating. For your cloak, use Enchant Cloak Superior Intellect, or if you're a tailor, use Light Weave Embroidery. For your chest, use Enchant Chest Glorious Stats for a bonus to everything. For your wrists, use Enchant Bracer Super Intellect, or Fur Lining Intellect if you're a leather worker. If you're a blacksmith, use your Socket Bracer as well to provide an extra gem slot. For your hands, use Enchant Gloves Superior Mastery. For your waist, use a Living Steel Belt Buckle to add an extra gem socket to it. For your leggings, use Greater Pearlescent Spell Thread for the intellect and spirit, allowing you to reforge some spirit away into more useful stats like Mastery and Haste. If you absolutely do not need spirit at all, then use a Greater Cerulean Spell Thread for intellect and critical strike. For your feet, use Enchant Boots Pandaren Step. If you're an enchanter, use Enchant Ring Greater Intellect on your rings. For your weapon, use Enchant Weapon Jade Spirit to proc an increase in your intellect for a short time. For your offhand weapon, if you have one, use Enchant Offhand Major Intellect. Now, one of the best ways to easily optimize your gear is Ask Mr. Robot. It's a free site that uses your armory page to examine and optimize your gear. It'll tell you what enchants you're missing, what gems you should use for your gear level, and how to reforge. Just remember that while this is great at lower gear levels, once you get into higher gear, Ask Mr. Robot becomes somewhat obsolete, and doing the math yourself using other programs is much better. But for basic gearing, use Ask Mr. Robot to help. He may disagree with what I've told you, telling you to put different gems and enchants on your gear, and what I have told you is just a general overview, so take his word over mine for your specific gear needs. You can find a link to Ask Mr. Robot in the description. Let's quickly talk about staves versus a one-hand and an offhand. Generally speaking, a staff will have similar stats to both a one-hand and an offhand combined, but you can only have one enchant on a staff. If you have a one-hand and an offhand item, you can enchant both. However, for the vast majority of cases, it is very important that you go with item level. If the staff is a higher item level than your one-hand and offhand, go with the staff. If one of the two items has a higher item level than the staff, go with that instead. If one of the two has a higher item level and one has a lower item level than a staff, it really doesn't matter which is which. In the Siege of Orgrimmar, your complete best gear is a one-hand and an offhand, but just call it on a situation-to-situation basis. Personally, I love seeing a shaman with a one-handed weapon and a shield, but I've had to use a staff for many, many months now. I want a shield! Anyway. On to talents and glyphs. Now, before we start here, it's important to note that the majority of talent choices for an Elemental Shaman aren't based on damage, but based on survivability and utility. There are a couple of exceptions, but the following choices are mine and mine alone. and the situation-to-situation nature of raids encourages that you change your talents for various fights. So, Tier 1, Survivability. Nature's Guardian, unfortunately, is not really that helpful. If you're brought below 30% health by an attack, your maximum health is increased for 10 seconds and your threat level is reduced. Generally speaking, this won't happen unless you've taken aggro from the tanks, and that's bad, and will probably be your fault, and no talent will save you at that point. Stone Bulwark Totem is a touch more helpful, but isn't my choice. First of all, you have to spend a global cooldown to place it, and the damage absorbed by the totem is not enough to counter big bursts from bosses. It may help with ticking damage, but that's really a healer's job to handle. Astral Shift, however, is my pick of the bunch. A 1.5 minute cooldown that reduces damage taken by 40% for 6 seconds. This pretty much allows you to mitigate every big burst of damage a boss can do through an ordinary fight. Combine this with your other mitigation and healing abilities and you are a tough bastard. Tier 2, Slows and Roots. Frozen Power does have its uses as it allows your Frost Shock to root a target for 5 seconds. This is useful on a fight like Nazgrim where the Iron Blades have to be controlled, but Frost Shock uses up the cooldown of your shocks, meaning you won't be able to use Flame Shock or Earth Shock during the time. And that's bad, because our rotation generally doesn't leave much room in between Flame Shock and Earth Shock. Just know that you will be likely sacrificing damage to use this one, but it does have its uses. Earth Grab Totem is my pick here. It replaces your Earthbind Totem and roots targets the first time it affects them. This is great for rooting groups of enemies, but generally you won't find that much use for this totem in normal raiding. Of the three, this is the one I feel has the most use. Just remember, don't root targets near squishy people. If the enemy can't reach their target, they'll hit whatever's closest. Finally, Windwalk Totem, which makes your raid immune to slows for 6 seconds. This sounds great, but there's nothing like this in the Siege of Orgrimmar, making Windwalk Totem entirely useless. Tier 3, Totems. Call of the Elements isn't helpful, as it resets totems that you generally won't use a lot. It will reset your Grounding Totem, your Earthbind or Earthgrab Totem, your Healing Stream Totem, your Capacitor Totem, your Stone Bulwark Totem, your Tremor Totem, and your Windwalk Totem. None of these are essential to a raid success. Totemic Persistence isn't that useful either. At first, being able to have 2 of the same type of totem down at once sounds great, until you realise that it doesn't do this for fire totems. This makes it just about useless for an Elemental Shaman. You won't need to have more than one of the same kind of totem up at once anyway. Totemic Projection is very helpful, and this is my pick. This allows you to target a space on the ground and move your totems to it. This is great. Move a Capacitor Totem or an Earthgrab Totem to a group of enemies to control them without going near them. Move a Healing Tide Totem into the center of the raid without sacrificing your positioning. The utility from this spell is great, and I thoroughly recommend it. Tier 4, Damage. This unfortunately doesn't leave much room for choice. Elemental Mastery with its temporary haste buff is good for blowing things up, but won't provide as much throughput overall as Echo of the Elements. Similarly, Ancestral Swiftness has a nice passive haste bonus and allows for an instant cast spell every 1.5 minutes, but it just isn't as strong throughput-wise as Echo of the Elements. Then, you have Echo of the Elements. This gives your direct damage and healing spells a chance to duplicate. This does not replace your Mastery, meaning that if you, for instance, cast a Lava Burst, you have a chance to cast 2 more immediately afterwards for free. This combined with Mastery is what makes the Elemental Shaman awesome. You need to use this with just about every single fight. Tier 5, Healing. Rushing Streams, which makes your Healing Stream Totem heal an extra person for more, isn't helpful. Your Healing Stream Totem won't heal for enough to help anyone, even with the increase, so don't worry about this talent. Ancestral Guidance is insanely strong, and this is my pick. It turns you into a hybrid for 10 seconds. Your damage and healing is duplicated into more healing. So if you use this spell, then AoE a pack of mobs with Chain Lightning, you'll heal the raid for a ton of health. This is a powerful cooldown in any gear, and a magnificent cooldown when you have high gear. Conductivity, unfortunately, doesn't really have much use. It allows you to put a healing rain down and then sustain the healing rain for upwards of 40 seconds by doing your rotation, basically. But your healing rain won't heal for much, and it requires the raid to be standing in it still for 40 seconds, which generally isn't going to happen. This may find use on Thok, but still isn't as strong as Ancestral Guidance. Tier 6, the level 90 abilities. Unleashed Fury is strong in very, very good gear, so 560 and above, but even then it is situational. We'll discuss it more in the advanced section. Generally speaking, it isn't as strong as Elemental Blast. Primal Elementalist is good for pure cleave fights, as it makes your elementals into insane pets that you can control, but the abilities they get are auto-casted anyway, and the one ability that they can use to buff yourself is a damage loss, unfortunately. This is the weakest of the 3 level 90 talents for Elemental. Elemental Blast is my pick. It's great for just about every gear level, and really strong when you have low gear. It's a hard-hitting spell that increases a secondary stat for a few seconds by a flat amount, meaning that it will be really helpful if you have low gear. It doesn't scale magnificently in high gear, but it's still helpful. In some fights, when you have strong gear, you can replace this. Again, we'll talk about this in the advanced section. So those are your talents. On to Glyphs. Thankfully, there's only really one glyph that I would call mandatory. This is Glyph of Chain Lightning, which increases the amount of targets Chain Lightning hits, but very slightly reduces its damage. Don't worry about the damage reduction. Hitting extra targets more than makes up for this, and it is just about essential for any kind of AoE. Other than the glyph, it's really up to you. A few honourable mentions of mine are Glyph of Fire Elemental Totem. This reduces the cooldown and duration of your Fire Elemental Totem by 50%, meaning you can use it more often, but the elemental hangs around for less time. This doesn't sound like it would be helpful, but it actually allows you to use the totem at very specific points in fights, where the Fire Elemental may not get a full minute of damage. Overall, there's not really much of a difference between having the glyph and not having the glyph, outside of the amount of time that the Fire Elemental has to hit the boss. Glyph of Shamanistic Rage. This makes your Shamanistic Rage dispel yourself of magic effects, allowing you to contribute towards your healer's efforts in the dispel department. Situational, but very helpful. Glyph of Flame Shock, which passively heals you when your Flame Shock ticks. Not massively helpful, but all healing is good, and this one you don't have to even do anything to trigger. Glyph of Spirit Walker's Grace, which increases its duration. This is helpful for exactly the reason it sounds like. More time being able to cast while moving is good. Glyph of Grounding Totem, making your Grounding Totem increase its cooldown at the benefit of being able to reflect spells. This does work for most trash spells, and will work for the Dark Shaman fight. Cardress's Froststorm Bolt can be reflected, and it is so awesome to do so. Do it. Finally, Glyph of Thunderstorm, which is the only minor glyph I'll talk about. This can, yes, be very helpful, as it removes the knockback from Thunderstorm. Use this if you're worried about your Thunderstorm buggering everything up, but we'll talk more about how Thunderstorm is awesome and the knockback is amazing in the advanced section. Alright, so we've gone over your gear, your gems, your enchants, your talents, and your glyphs. Let's put it to use now, and talk about your rotation. The Elemental Shaman rotation is nice and simple, and changes depending on how many targets you're fighting. When you're fighting just the one enemy, this is your basic rotation mid-fight. Keep Flame Shock up on the target at all times. This is very important. Refresh Flame Shock when it has 3 seconds or less remaining. Use Lava Burst. Watch out for Lava Surge procs, which reset the cooldown of your Lava Burst and make it instant, allowing you to cast it much more often than the cooldown suggests. Keep an eye out for this. Use Elemental Blast. Use Earthshock when you have 5 or 6 stacks of Lightning Shield. 7 is the cap, and using Earthshock earlier at 5 or 6 stacks ensures you don't waste any of them. Refresh the duration on your Searing Totem if it's about to run out of time, but only if it will see use for about 45 seconds. If the boss will die before that, don't bother. Finally, use Lightning Bolt as a filler, or while you're moving. Remember that Spirit Walker's Grace can allow you to use your rotation while moving. As a note, if there are other enemies in the fight, using Flame Shock on one extra enemy that you aren't focusing on will slightly increase your single target damage through more lava surges. However, more than one extra Flame Shock, so 2 overall, will lower your damage, so just go with the 2. If you're against 2 enemies, both of which need to be damaged simultaneously, keep Flame Shock up on both and do your single target rotation, replacing Lightning Bolt with Chain Lightning as your filler. If you're up against multiple enemies, all of which need to die and will last for more than 25 seconds, so bosses basically, flame shock them all. If you're up against 3 to 6 enemies, all of which need to die, bring out the chain lightning, and don't stop until they're all disintegrated. Spam chain lightning. If you're up against more than 6 enemies, all of which will survive for a while, which is quite unlikely, you'll want to use Earthquake, then Magma Totem, then use Chain Lightning to fill. Don't use Thunderstorm unless there are more than 10 enemies, which is very unlikely, and never use it if it will knock them away from other damage dealers. Basically, only use Thunderstorm for its damage if it is glyphed. This situation is unbelievably unlikely, so focus mostly on weaving in between your single target rotation and your AoE with Chain Lightning. Because Chain Lightning replaces Lightning Bolt when you have 2 enemies to kill, you can move seamlessly between single target and AoE. Now let's quickly talk about your opener for a fight. Right before the pull starts, you want to put down your Fire Elemental. As the fight starts, you'll want to use Elemental Blast so that the cast finishes as the tank attacks. At that point you want to use Bloodlust and Stormlash Totem, but only if the fight calls for it. If you need to Bloodlust at any other point in the fight, don't use Bloodlust at the start. If the Bloodlust is more than 5 minutes away, use Stormlash at the start, as its cooldown will be up for Bloodlust when you use it. Apply Flame Shock. After that, activate Ascendance and start Lava Bursting. Once Ascendance ends, go into your normal rotation. Once your Fire Elemental runs out, place your Searing Totem and your Earth Elemental Totem down. At this point, you're onto your normal rotation. A few tips about your rotation. First, know your ABC. This is a common theme for casters and it is vitally important. A, B, C. Always be casting. If you're standing around without doing anything, you are a waste of time, space, and a raid slot. Always do something. If you don't have things to kill, heal people. If you don't have people to heal or things to kill, use Healing Rain and Earthquake to prepare for healing and dealing damage. If nothing is happening at all, refresh your Searing Totem. And finally, never stop casting a spell to cast another. If your Lava Surge procs while you're casting a spell, you have time to finish your cast before using your instant Lava Burst. Never stop casting and always be casting. Secondly, know what you're doing next. Your rotation is a priority system, but it's fairly predictable. Track your Flame Shock, your Lightning Shield stacks, the cooldowns of your Lava Burst, Elemental Blast, and Ascendance, and know what spell you are going to cast before you cast it. As soon as you press the button to start casting a spell, that spell is essentially casted. You don't need to do anything else with that spell. Think ahead. What's up next? Elemental Blast, Lava Burst, or a Lightning Bolt filler? If so, what's the duration left on your Searing Totem? Is it less than 10 seconds? If so, replace the Lightning Bolt with your Searing Totem placement. Then start casting another Lightning Bolt. Thinking ahead as much as possible is important. I generally know what the next 2 or 3 spells I'm going to cast will be. Combine this with the encounter mechanics and good knowledge of them, and you'll be weaving your way through fights. Finally, learn your rotation. I don't just mean know it, I mean have it in your fingers. Spend as much time as you can learning your rotation until it is muscle memory, and you can do it without thinking. Once you're at that level, you're ready to go into the advanced section, I think. Spend time on training dummies, doing your rotation over and over and over until you know it inside and out, along with all of the timings, all of the weird cooldowns that come with it. Figure it out. No guide can teach you muscle memory. All I can do is tell you to try and get it. Now, let's talk about cooldown usage. Bloodlust is the best raid damage cooldown in the game. You need to know when to use it. Make sure you read up on fights. I have handy guides for the LFR and Flex versions of Siege of Orgrimmar and Throne of Thunder on my channel. And know when to Bloodlust. The only time you should ask when to Bloodlust is when you're new in a guild and you're making sure you know when they want to Bloodlust. Stormlash Totem and Bloodlust work great together, but see if you can use Stormlash at the start of a fight if Bloodlust is going to be more than 5 minutes away. This is great for increasing raid damage. Your Fire Elemental Totem will update dynamically, meaning that all of the buffs you gain, your Elemental will gain. Be it trinkets, buffs from your Elemental Blast, Bloodlust, anything that increases your stats will increase your Elementals. Your Earth Elemental Totem is not nearly as powerful as it seems. It, like your Fire Elemental, updates dynamically, but it does so little damage that over an entire 1 minute duration, it will deal about as much damage as a single Lava Burst. As such, you only want to activate your Earth Elemental Totem in place of a Lightning Bolt cast, when it will get a full minute of use, and always use your Fire Elemental over your Earth Elemental. Ascendance is awesome, but you need to know a couple of things to get the most out of it. First, use it whenever you Bloodlust. It gains loads from Bloodlust. If you Bloodlust at the start of the fight, use it then. If you Bloodlust near the end of the fight, then use Ascendance as much as you can while also saving it for the Bloodlust moment. Normally, I get 2, maybe 3 Ascendances off during a fight, and you should too. 1 at the start, and then 1 with a Bloodlust or near the end. Additionally, make sure you have Flame Shock up on your target before you use Ascendance, and make sure it has 15 seconds or more remaining before going Lava Burst crazy. When you're in Ascendance, you want to be Lava Bursting, and nothing but Lava Bursting. As such, you also want to activate your racials, such as Berserking, Blood Fury, or whatever else provides temporary damage increases as you use Ascendance. Use your profession-based cooldowns too, like Synapse Springs for Engineers. You also want to use a potion at this point, but we'll talk more about potions in the advanced section. Finally, Spirit Walker's Grace. Use this whenever you use Ascendance generally, as it allows you to keep up the Lava Burst beatdown while still moving. Let's talk about a couple of useful add-ons that will be of aid to you in Elemental Shamaning. First, Weak Auras. This is an obtusely powerful add-on that will allow you to create on-screen effects for just about anything you can dream of. I use it for loads of things, tracking Flame Shock, tracking my totems, my gloves, my lightning shield stacks, reminders for totems, cooldowns, and anything else I find useful. It's a very complicated add-on, but you can find my guide for Weak Auras by clicking the annotation on screen now. It'll open in a separate tab. Next, a good clean cast bar will help you chain cast your spells, allowing you to see latency, cast times, and scaling it to whatever size you wish. These all make for good knowledge of your spell casts, which is very important. I use Quartz for this. You can find detail about how to set up Quartz in my basic UI guide, available by clicking the annotation on screen now. Again, it'll open in a separate tab. Finally, a good nameplate add-on will make target swapping very easy. I use tidy plates for this, and good target swapping is important. You can find information about this in my second UI video, which goes over advanced streamlining of a user interface. Again, it's available via the annotation on screen and will open in a separate tab. Next, let's discuss being a hybrid. This is very, very important, and it allows you to elevate yourself beyond the role of a pure damage dealer. One of the greatest aspects of the Shaman is being able to support the raid while simultaneously dealing damage. And here are a few tips and reminders to keep you being more than just a simple DPSer and a great raider. First, you have a lot of healing abilities. They are in order of usefulness: Ancestral Guidance, Healing Tide Totem, Healing Stream Totem, Healing Rain, Healing Surge, and Chain Heal. Use them! Guidance should be used whenever big bursts of damage are coming in, and every fight should see you using Guidance and Healing Tide Totem at least once. I try to use them as much as I possibly can. Healing Stream Totem can help when the healing is very tight, and Healing Rain, Healing Surge, and Chain Heal are for when you desperately need to help heal. Don't just sit there and die while the healers are struggling. Your heals can and will save lives. Secondly, a quick one. You can dispel curses! Do so! Don't sit there and let people be cursed. You can deal with this, and do so. It's wonderful. Finally, make sure you use your utility spells. Capacitor Totem, Earthgrab Totem, Hex, Bind Elemental, Farsight. Yes, it can be helpful for scouting patrols. Purge Magic for dispelling, and Interrupt. Interrupt as much as you can. Always try to interrupt things. It mitigates damage wonderfully. Remember, you are a hybrid, and you have the potential to be so much more than just a damage dealer. You can be a hero. Isn't that the point? Now, time to speak advanced stuff. This is for shaman who know their class, and who may be trying to squeeze a little bit more out of it. Over my time as a shaman, I've discovered, either by myself, from guides, live streams, or articles about shaman, many little things you can do to help be more awesome. First, Flame Shock. It ticks approximately every 3 seconds, depending on your haste, and has a chance to proc your Lava Surge. As such, when Lava Surge procs, you have a 3 or so second window before it can proc again, potentially wasting another Lava Surge. For this reason, you can time your abilities and squeeze out another spell before you waste a proc. Again, this is just more of a reason to never stop casting a spell. Stopping a spell is never a good idea, so don't do it. Next, Pre-Pot. It is so important. Use a potion of the Jade Serpent right before a pull begins to trigger the 1 minute cooldown so that you can use it again with your next Ascendance. And always use a potion during Bloodlust. Come to every raid with flasks and potions galore, enough for 2 potions per pull, especially on progress. When the fight starts, you can alter your opening somewhat. If you start with Fire Elemental as the fight begins, then launch an Elemental Blast as the tank pulls, and then hit Unleash Elements, you can cast an Unflame-Shocked Lava Burst and follow it up with a Flame Shock to get the extra damage from Unleash Elements for both the Lava Burst and the Flame Shock. Just note, Lava Burst does its damage calculation as soon as you fire it, not when it hits your enemy. So if you get the cast off before Flame Shock finishes its duration, it will gain the bonus damage. If Flame Shock falls off while the missile is in progress to reaching the enemy, it will still gain the damage. Next, there are times when you can squeeze out and unleash elements. The situation must be as such. Your Flame Shock has about 4 or 5 seconds remaining, Lava Surge has not procced, and you're about to cast a Lava Burst. Use Unleash Elements, followed by the Lava Burst, followed immediately by the Flame Shock. The Lava Burst needs to be casted, not instant, and the Flame Shock on the target needs to not fall off before you cast the Lava Burst. By following the Lava Burst with a Flame Shock, you get a Lava Burst with the 50% extra damage from the Flame Shock, and the 30% extra damage from the Unleash Elements. And the Flame Shock gets the extra 30% damage for its duration too, alongside refreshing it. The rest of the time, outside of this situation, Unleash Elements is not worth the global cooldown. Next, know how fights work so that you have something ready for every single burst of damage. A great Elemental Shaman has the ability to be a tough bugger, and by cleverly using Astral Shift for a burst, then a Shamanistic Rage for another, then a Guidance, then a Healing Tide, then a Health Stone, then repeat with whatever's off cooldown, you'll be one of the last raiders to die to raid damage. If an Elemental Shaman dies, it's because they buggered up. Next, don't use Glyph of Thunderstorm if you know what you're doing. So many people rattle on about that glyph, and how Thunderstorm is pointless if it isn't glyphed, but these people are talking out of their asses. Thunderstorm's knockback is awesome! It's a great interrupt and movement ability. Use it to knock a ranged mob into melee, like the archers and shaman on Galakras, or use it to stop something from casting, or use it to knock back an enemy that's about to hit someone, like the assassins on Nazgrim or the bombs on Blackfuse. Clutch thunderstorms save lives, and can be incredibly helpful, but don't use it too much, and use it smartly. Be the guy who, when they use it, helps the raid, not the guy who hinders it. Next, Earthquake isn't strong at all, really, but use it when you know something is about to spawn and you can't use any other damage spells. For instance, put it down on the Galakras fight before the mobs spawn, because you have nothing to do beforehand. Put it down during General Nazgrim while he's in defensive stance and the adds are about to spawn, because you can't hit General Nazgrim and you have nothing else to do. Things like this help your damage a lot. Next up, Glyph of Chain Lightning is awesome, but it's not effective on fights where it will only hit 3 targets, so make sure you swap the glyph for another when you know it'll be useful to do so. For instance, the Fallen Protectors can be Chain Lightninged down if the raid is feeling nice for you, and single target fights can have you replace the Glyph of Chain Lightning with another more helpful one. Speaking of switching, go between Elemental Blast and Unleashed Fury for single target fights, but only if you have a higher than about 560 item level. Elemental Blast is great if there is any target swapping involved, but a pure single target fight will see Unleashed Fury pull ahead. When you use Unleashed Fury, put it in place of Elemental Blast on your priority list, using it on cooldown. Fights like Iron Juggernaut, Malkarok and Thok are the main examples of where Unleashed Fury is helpful. Next, if you have a single global cooldown available and you have to move, Ghost Wolf. It's an awesome spell for movement, and make sure you put it on a good key binding so you can weave in and out of it on the fly. You may not be the first to any particular place, but you will never be last, and you will always be there in time if you used Ghost Wolf. Next, Chain Lightning is awesome, but don't rely on it entirely. Watch how fights develop. If lots of enemies are dying, make sure you swap from Chain Lightning to your normal spells as soon as it becomes viable. Wasting time with Chain Lightning is a bad idea, and it's a mark of a bad and lazy shaman. Also, as you Chain Lightning and things start to die, make sure you continuously target swap, so that you never have a failed Chain Lightning cast on a dead enemy. Always cast Chain Lightning on the thing with the highest health. Next, Lava Burst. It should never be cast without a Flame Shock on the target. Most of the time. But if the target is going to die before the cooldown of Lava Burst will come back up, then go ahead. Lava Burst unflame shocked will deal more damage than a Lightning Bolt. Fulmination is next, and it's tricky to figure out because of how random our Lightning Bolts are. Sometimes you'll only get 1 Lightning Bolt, sometimes you'll get 3, and each has a chance to add Lightning Shield stacks. As such, you can go from 4 to having 7 almost instantly, and having a benchmark for when you use Earthshock to discharge Fulmination is important. I have my WeakAuras set up to tell me about Fulmination at 5 stacks, and normally I use them at 5 or 6, not at 7, because our reaction time as human beings will never be fast enough to hit Earthshock the second we hit 7 stacks, because of how erratic our Lightning Bolt casts are. Every stack of Lightning Shield beyond 7 is a waste of DPS, so don't take the risk. Next, your legendary Meta Gem. Track it. The buff is called Tempus Repeat, and it's basically a mini Bloodlust. It's so strong that it's actually worth clipping a Flame Shock when the buff is about to end. The extra ticks from the haste bonus is strong, so consider reapplying Flame Shock at 6 or 7 seconds remaining. If your gem's proc is about to end, it'll be worth it. Finally, gems and enchants may be changed depending on your goals. I have a Zen Wild Jade to help me with my hit cap, and Mr. Robot will likely tell you to add weird things to your gem and enchant list. But when it comes to haste and mastery, we need to have a discussion about simming. Alright, let's talk about the perfect balance. The haste versus mastery debate has raged on for a long time, and every shaman has different stories about their own stats and which is better for them. Just know this, the two stats are so close that in practice it won't increase your DPS that much, and you can easily get by without the perfect balance. And yes, you can get the perfect balance. It does exist, and it depends entirely upon your gear. The only way to figure out what your perfect balance is, you have to sim yourself. I'll quickly take you through how to do it. First, I just want to say that I learned how to do this via Totem Spot and the user Ike. Here's a link to his guide, much more in-depth than mine is going to be, complete with discussion about the simming itself. I suggest you check it out sometime, it's very enlightening. But the first thing you need to do is download SimCraft. You can find the link in the description. Once you've downloaded and installed it, open it up. Go to Options, and under the Global tab, you want to set the iterations to 10,000, the length to 600 seconds, and the variance to 20%. Now, go to the buffs/debuffs section. Everything here should be checked. Next, go to Scaling. You want to check Intellect, Crit, Haste, and Mastery. Ignore the Plots tab, you don't need it for this. Under Reforge Plots, change the amount to either 3,000 or 5,000. The higher the number, the bigger the graph at the end will be, and it doesn't make too much of a difference. Change the step amount to 500. Only plot Forge options for Haste and Mastery. Don't do so for Crit, or the graph won't make any sense. Now, go to Import. You'll get taken to the front page of the WoW site. Find your character on the Armory, or if you can't do it via the SimCraft box, do it via your web browser, and copy-paste the URL into SimCraft's box at the bottom. Hit Import in the bottom right. You'll get swamped with text. Ignore this, it's not important, don't panic. Hit Simulate in the bottom right. Now, you wait. SimCraft will now simulate thousands of fights with your gear, varying the amount of mastery and haste you have to see which grants the highest DPS. This may take anywhere between 5 minutes to 20 minutes, so be patient and wait. When it's done, you'll get tabbed over to the results page. Scroll down a bit, and on the right will be a Reforge plot as a graph. It will look something like this. On the bottom, in the middle, is the 0 point, which is what your gear is right now. It's your haste and mastery levels as they are. To the left is more mastery and less haste, and to the right is more haste and less mastery, with each square signifying a jump of 500 in one way or another. 500 less mastery, 500 more haste, or the other way around. You want the 0 point to be the highest point of the list. As you can see, mine is not. I need about 1,000 more mastery and 1,000 less haste to get there. I need about 1,000 more mastery and 1,000 less haste to get there. The example that Ike gave in his guide has a shot of what it should look like, the highest point of the graph being the 0 point. This system isn't 100% perfect, but it's how I do things, and it's a great way to see if you've gotten too much of one stat or another. Then you can reforge, gem, and enchant towards the stat you need, and then you can resim yourself, and you see how you fare. It's a bit trial and error, but you will eventually reach your perfect balance. And, as the Pandaren have taught us, balance is everything. So, to conclude, let's talk about your main goal. Your main goal as a shaman is not to be a damage dealer. It's not to be a healer. It's to be a raider. You and every other person in your raid is there to kill bosses, get loot, and enjoy themselves. You can help that by being a great shaman and dealing both damage and healing, by having utility, by knowing the fights, by being a friendly person, and by being effective. Everyone does it. Hell, I do it too. But do not whore the meters, especially on progression. Chain lightning is great, but it won't help if the damage is better served single target. People who disagree, who say that the damage meters are everything, who are trying to beat everyone else on the meters, they are one of three things: ignorant, stupid, or assholes. Be a good raider. That is the most important piece of advice any guide can give you, ever. Be friendly, responsible, and awesome, and regardless of your class, you will be an asset to your raid. Master your rotation until it's muscle memory. Know it inside and out through hours of doing it. Use your support abilities, and be the guy who tremor totems the fear on trash around Malkarok. Be the guy who thunderstorms a bomb away from a healer at the last second. Be the guy who can do insane DPS, and who can be relied on to handle mechanics, and who can use a cooldown to help the raid stay alive, and who can, on top of all of that, be fun, intelligent, and pleasant to raid with. Enjoy yourself. You are in a game. Master it if you can, but always enjoy yourself. Surround yourself with people you like to raid with, who will sit there and listen to you giggle inanely as you chain lightning on trash, who you can chat and laugh with as you raid. Roleplay as Emperor Palpatine. Enjoy your chain lightning. Enjoy the feeling of being a constant turret of doom and destruction. And most importantly, enjoy your time in World of Warcraft. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any questions about the Elemental Shaman, I'm always available for contact. For that, or any other reason, you can contact me via the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. I'm always after feedback, so let me know what you think. Make sure you subscribe to catch my videos as soon as they come out. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck as Master of the Elements.
Brothers falling at my side with honor.